Friendship, betrayal, drama. The finish line, I wrote the first part in kind of like a fever dream. I became obsessed with those characters. I became obsessed with that world. I wrote so fast and I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to write the whole book like this. I'm going to be done in 3 months. And then I hit a wall. And I suddenly didn't know where I was going, didn't know if anyone in the world would care about those characters, which is a very common thing in the middle of a book. In the middle of a book, you often suddenly think this is the worst idea you've ever had. But I struggled to come out of it a bit more with the finish line. And then a friend made quite a throwaway, sarcastic suggestion for the end of the book. And I was like, there we go, that's what we're doing. And then it came back to me. We're all presenting a front. We all are pretending to be perfect people, happy people. We're on top of it all. We're in control of it all. And everyone's got something going on underneath. Every person you see has got their own drama. Everyone, I keep saying to my children, no one's a, what do these kids call it? A non-NPC, non-playing character. Nobody's an NPC in their own life. Everybody's the main character in their own life. Everyone's got something going on underneath. And I like to think that's what my books do. They look at what's going on underneath. I don't know really if it's what have I learned from writing about friendship, more what have I learned about friendships that has informed my writing. You know, I think friendships are such a big part of all our lives, and I think especially for women, our female friendships are just a huge support system for us, a huge part of who we are. And when they go bad, it's a big thing. And in my books, thankfully not in my life, in my books, the friendships often go bad. So for me, these 2 books followed quite logically the one from the other in terms of writing. I don't know, I mean, I know we're supposed to say that we evolve with every book. I don't know how much I evolved between those 2. Definitely from earlier books, I feel like I've gone much deeper into friendships, much deeper into that betrayal theme. But I don't know between Little Secrets and the finish line. I think because I started writing the one, I had the idea for the finish line while I was writing Little Secrets. So the writing process almost felt like a natural extension for me rather than an evolution. The finish line for me was in many ways an exploration of my mother's school experience and my mother's childhood. So my mother went to boarding school in Pretoria, which is where the finish line is set, the school days part is set at boarding school in Pretoria. My mother was the only Jewish girl at St. Mary's DSG at the time. Obviously, much before the setting of the finish line, my mother was at school in the 50s and 50s. And 40s and 50s maybe. And she was the only Jewish girl at an Anglican school, a high Anglican school. The headmistress was still a nun in those days. And she didn't fit in. And a lot of her personality was informed by those early years of not fitting in. She also actually lived down the road from the boarding school. So it was weird that she was at boarding school. She was at boarding school from when she was 9. And I think I played with that idea a lot, this idea of not fitting into a school, working very hard to fit in, but being left with that feeling of never quite being the right person in the right place. And Brenda in the finish line, while her story is very different from my mother's, she never entirely feels like she's the right person in the right place after, even before she goes to boarding school, but it's part of her personality. And I think while I took a little bit of my own life, it was not my school life. It was an amalgamation of my mother's school life and my life as a parent in a particular type of school. And I worked all those feelings in. It's very interesting. I have a fantasy life where I am a full-time writer. I think every writer who's not a full-time writer has that fantasy life. And then what happens when I go into my fantasy life, because I do it as like a special treat for myself, I go into full-on fantasy mode and I think, oh, I'd wake up and I'd walk the dogs and then I'd go and I'd write. And then I suddenly find myself going, but maybe I'd also quite like to do a little bit of this type of work. And I fantasize myself back into my real life, because there's something about having different challenges on your brain and your time that I think is important. I think I am a better writer for having to fit it into a small space of time, and I am a better writer for having other challenges on my brain at other times of the day. I think the hardest thing to do is to have a writing-based day job and then try to write as your other thing. I think those are the people who have the biggest challenge. I think being in a totally different world, you then have that creative energy left. I would say to people, be very careful of giving up your day job, first of all, because you are not going to make any money from writing. So if you quite like eating, don't give up your day job. But also be careful of giving up that satisfaction that comes from the day job and that stimulation. I listened to a pod the other day where a writer actually had to go and get herself a day job because she found she was a young writer. She didn't have anything to write about because she didn't have a day job and she didn't know about the lives of ordinary people. I know about the lives of ordinary people. For me, the story seed always starts with what if. And every good idea I've ever had, I've had a lot of really bad ideas, but every good idea I've had has started with a situation where I look at it a little bit differently and then I ask, what if? And that will lead me to the story. The best writing advice around that I've read is complicate it. So think your what if, and then complicate it, and then if possible complicate it again. And then you've got a story.